My soul belongs to God, I know. I made that bargain long ago. He gave me hope when hope was gone. He gave me strength to journey on. My friend shared those lines with me about 5 years ago. The lines are from the musical Les Miserables, or Les Mis for short. Some of you know the story, and I'm going to give it a very short summary here. Maybe a little awkward in some of the details, so don't Google check me, please. But just go with it. But basically, Jean Valjean has stolen bread. This is in France, okay, many, many years ago. He has stolen bread, and he went to prison and tried to get out, and they added on to it. So for years, he's been in prison, and he's finally been released. And he goes, he's basically just out. Okay, go. Start a life. And he is taken in one night by a priest. And the next morning, he is going to steal silver, and in fact, attacks the priest in the process. And off he goes with these silver candlesticks. Well, a little bit later, he comes back with the army, these soldiers. We caught him. Aha! And the priest knows that if he says, yep, he stole it, that life is over for Jean Valjean. It's back to prison, and they're never going to let him out. After all, how many years did he serve for stealing bread? But the priest says, oh, no, I gave him those. In fact, John, bless your heart, you forgot the rest of the silver that I was going to give you. Naughty boy, you come on, give all of this. Housekeeper, I think these soldiers would love a little drink. And we're not talking about coffee either, okay? And they're more than happy to take the hospitality and sends them out of the room. And at this point, when they're gone, the priest says, and I'm going to do it southern style, boy, I have saved your rear end. Your soul has been bought with silver. Do something with it. Make something of yourself. God believes in you. I do too. And Jean Valjean does just that. There's much more to the story, but that is the point of the hope that he was given when his life was ransomed in silver. In the same way, the hope that we have is our lives are ransomed by Jesus Christ. As I look at this section from the book of Acts, this pivotal point in the life of Paul, I'm struck by the theme of hope. Hope when it seems hope is lost. Hope when Paul is rejected. Hope when Paul is marked by failure. We see hope first when lost. Hope leads to new understanding and a new orientation. Paul is on the road to Damascus. He is a Top Gun Pharisee. He is going to root out this heresy of the Christians. He has been getting people arrested. He is just, he's a man on a mission. And wrong kind of mission, but that's what he is doing. And he's on the road, and like I said, he encounters Jesus Christ. Knocks him off the donkey. He can't see, but he hears saying, why do you persecute me? And off he goes, and he's eventually taken to Damascus. And Ananias is told by the Lord, the Holy Spirit, you need to go to Paul. And like, excuse me? Did I hear this right spirit? This is the guy that is persecuted us. We are fearing him coming to town. He does it anyway. He is there to meet with Paul and begin Paul on his journey. At a point when Paul is hopeless, he's completely disoriented. Christ is reaching out to him. Some years ago, I was listening to a sermon on a podcast, and doing that as I work out. Ministers are weird, okay? We listen to sermons while we work out, okay? But this fellow is currently serving a church in Atlanta, but was in California at the time, and talked about a church he was serving in New Jersey when he was in seminary. It was part of your seminary work. I mean, you went and served churches. And there was the Christmas Eve service, and he's there with the minister at the church in Manhattan. He would take the train to go up there. And it was Christmas Eve service, or at least one of the services, and this young man wanders in. He has a drinking problem, his life is a mess, and he begins to pour out his issues with the pastor. Well, the service is about to begin, so the pastor says to the intern, and that's the gentleman who's sharing this in the sermon, all right, you kick off Christmas Eve. What? Okay. And so in he goes and starts the Christmas Eve, the call to worship, all of that. And the pastor of the church, like the young man, said, please wait here in the library. I will get some people to speak with you. He promised me, he said yes. And so there, still towards the beginning of the service, he says, and then I was talking to the senior minister, is saying, Bill Wilson is with us here. And if you don't know that, Bill Wilson is the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill Wilson is here with us. He's in the library. If you're a friend of Bill Wilson, he'd like to meet with you. And now that intern said, I watched people get up out of the Christmas Eve service and walk to the library. Sorry, the story still gets to me. To meet with that young man. To give him hope when it seemed that hope was lost. In the same way, Christ met with Paul and meets with us. During the season in Damascus, there's a season he goes to Arabia, which just meant the wilderness. Imagine today you need to get away and think through things, and you rented a cabin in a state park. Maybe you went up to Lake Texoma. This is a great place to go, or something like that. Just spend a few days away, or a couple, maybe even a month away. It's basically what he did, but basically thought through what was going on, prayed through it. The Lord met him, and for 3 years, he has a life in Damascus, serving and teaching. And then, as I shared in the story, he had to get out of town. And so his friends got him out. And he goes to Jerusalem. And for 3 years now, he has been serving. He is a fired-up Christian. And he goes to Jerusalem. He suffers rejection. And yet the Lord gives him hope in a season of rejection. He comes there, and nobody really wants to believe it. But Barnabas says, he has had an encounter with the Lord. He is changed, and gives to him the right hand of fellowship. And basically takes him around. I can imagine Barnabas going to pay social calls. And everybody knows Barnabas. That's actually his nickname. It means son of encouragement. And it's kind of like me, like my dog. But imagine Barnabas knocking on the door. Well, hey, Barnabas, how you doing? And there's Paul. Lovely. Okay, come into the house. Watching Paul. But anyway, he brings him into the fellowship. This is for a short season of time that Paul is there. And he believes he has started a new chapter. But maybe you have started a new chapter, but it's not what you expected. And that chapter was actually more of a paragraph than a true chapter. Paul experiences great failure, and yet in that great failure, he is given a new opportunity. So he begins to speak to the Greek-speaking Jews about Jesus. And this is Paul's group. His name was Saul and Paul. It wasn't like he had a name change. It was, in my Hebrew world, they call me Saul. But in my Greek world, they call me Paul. He grew up in Tarsus. I've shared this before. Greek would have been his first language. That was the first scriptures he read, were those that were translated into Greek. Okay, he took Hebrew as a second language. These are his people, the ones that he should most easily be able to reach. And And they reject him. And once again, he is in trouble. And his friends get him on a boat and get him back to Tarsus. Now what follows after this is the verse that says, and then the church grew. It's almost like a backhanded compliment. To say, yeah, once got Paul out of here, things got pretty good. And off he goes to Tarsus. Maybe you have started what you thought was a chapter, and it was just a bridge paragraph. And he spent, it's estimated, 12 years in Tarsus. See, it's not like Paul had the road to Damascus, and the next thing you know, he's writing all these letters that we have in the New Testament. They come after years in the trenches with the Lord. 12 years he is in Tarsus. Now the church continues to grow, and a group comes about in Antioch. In a way, it's like the church is becoming a franchise. The apostles aren't planting or running it themselves, an initial group. And so they go to check it out, and yes, something is happening among the Gentiles here in Antioch. What do we do about this? And Barnabas thinks, hey, I ought to go to Tarsus and get Paul. I bet he would be great for this. Now, 15 years have passed since that initial encounter on the road to Damascus. And I wrote this morning, I was thinking, okay, 15 years ago, what was my situation? At that point, I was an expected father. I mean, we knew a child was on the way, but Bennett had not even been born. We had a room already. We even had a little sack, little sack, all everything we're going to take with us to the hospital, okay? It was all ready, because there's no other children who could do that then. You know, we could go. But there's not even a child in our lives. All of that has happened. So imagine his own life in the 15 years that have passed. Paul had faced hope, and then he had faced failure. And then he got hope in a new direction. A reminder that God will even use past mistakes, that God will even use years in Tarsus. We don't know what he did. Obviously, he had to make tents, because he's basically, an old profession of Pharisee is basically out the window. He knew how to make tents. We understand there really wasn't a church had not started there, and we're guessing maybe some communication with the disciples. We don't know. It's very vague. With some guesses that we can make. But there were 12 years he had there, a lot of time of prayer, I'm sure, reading, pondering, maybe some communication with the church in Jerusalem. But in that time, even in that season, God was able to use it to prepare him for the ministry that followed. One of the other people I listened to on the podcast, he's an entrepreneur, one of his podcasts, and he talked about 2008 and the big financial setbacks and what they had to do in his company and the lessons he learned from that, because he said, I never want to waste a downturn. And he even talked about this current situation and making, what am I learning from this? How can I use it? I don't want to waste a pandemic. Did not have a pandemic. But anyway, the point is, how can he use it? How can he use it? He's asking, how can I use it? Paul later writes words like, Jesus told me, my grace is sufficient for you. He had a thorn in the flesh, using that expression. 3 times he asked for it to be removed, and it wasn't. The answer I got was, my grace is sufficient. And so he will boast because of that.